Good afternoon. I'm here today with Lloyd Diamond, the CEO of Pixium Vision, a company that we're spotlighting here at LSI Europe 23 in Barcelona. And so, Lloyd, welcome to the studio here. Tell us how it all began. What was the initial vision for Pixium?
Sure. Thanks for having me anyway, Scott. Yeah, appreciate it. Love the opportunity to talk about Pixium. So back in 2011, Jose Arancel, who's a well-known ophthalmologist, had this vision, no pun intended, of starting companies that have sort of one purpose, and that is to solve the blindness question, right? It's something that we've been grappling with for hundreds of years, right. Blindness. And so way before that, he started the Vision Institute in Paris, which is an institute that regroups the brightest minds in research, public and private money, with the goal of developing assets or technologies and then spinning them out into companies to try to solve the blindness issue. So in 2011, Pixium was born. It was co-founded by Jose and then another serial entrepreneur in France. And they said, look, we want to be a technology play in this field. A lot of drug development had been invested in to try to solve the blindness issue, injections for wet AMD and gene therapies and things of that sort, but nothing really on the tech side. About 10 years earlier, there was a lot of research being done in the field of retinal implants. Can you stimulate the cells in the retina or the optic nerve or the visual cortex to try to bypass the parts of the visual system that weren't working that actually led to blindness? So they looked at retinal implants and they said, you know, we're going to start this company. So they acquired a German company called IMI, which was one of the early pioneers in the development of retinal implants. And so Pixium was born. That first generation technology they called Iris was an epiretinal implant, similar to Second Sight in the US, was one of the market leaders in that space as well. And so they really started to invest time and money in trying to develop that technology. That was back in 2011.
Right. So it's been quite a journey for you, and LSI has been fortunate enough to be tracking you. One of the questions I like to ask entrepreneurs like yourself who are taking on this challenging task, because it's not easy, and there are times when we look ourselves in the mirror and we wonder, why are we doing this? A technology like Pixium's really does change people's lives. So rather than focusing on the technology, I'd like to talk about the impact that you're seeing it have on patients. Maybe you could, I know you're in humans now, maybe you can give us a couple examples of how the technology is already changing people's lives, and then maybe a vision for the future for us.
Sure. So I don't want to talk about tech, but I have to maybe backtrack a bit. So that first technology investment by the company didn't work out. And so fast forward, we entered into an agreement with Stanford, and now we have an excellent technology called Prima. And we are implanting dry AMD patients. So geographic atrophy is the target. And this is a disease that affects the aging. It's probably, if not the leading cause of blindness amongst the aging, one of the leading causes of blindness. And these patients that we are working with usually average age in the mid-70s. I mean, these are people that have families, have grandchildren, have pets, you know, things that they love, people that they love and adore, and they can no longer see them. And their whole lives they've lived independently, and now they can't do simple tasks like reading a shopping list or cooking or playing, you know, Sudoku or cards or whatever it is that they want to do, nonetheless see their grandchildren. And so it is an emotional impact on these patients that it goes very deep. It's quite profound. Not to mention the cost of care of these patients, which has been well documented. And so we've implanted now just under 50 patients in Europe and the US. We are completing our final pivotal study in Europe. We will have the data associated with this trial at the end of December, early next year, and then we'll publish the data. And what we've been able to glean so far is that we have restored central vision, which is what they lose in this disease, to the extent where patients are able to gain levels of independence. They can read again. We have patients that are able to read novels, as crazy as that may sound. For professionals and clinicians that understand this disease state, this has never been seen before. I mean, when you lose central vision, you don't get it back. Not even with the injections they have today. There's nothing that you can do. And so now we have patients that can, I don't know, read the weather in the newspaper, play cards. We have a grandmother who's able to read a children's book to their grandchild again. I mean, it's...
So we're not talking about just slowing down something that exists. We're talking about restoring. And maybe we talk about a little bit about the current standard of care. You sort of touched on it. But let's talk about how they're currently being treated, and then we can continue with this part of it.
Sure. So before the injections, right, I guess Apellis and Iveric, they have now recently had injections, complement inhibition injections that have been approved for slowing down the growth of the disease. Prior, there really was no treatment. So basically, patient went to the ophthalmologist, they got a scan for a routine eye exam, and the ophthalmologist said, oh, we're starting to see some formation in the macula. It looks like you have the onset of AMD, dry AMD. And all they could say is, we're just going to watch and wait, and we'll see how it progresses. They'll maybe prescribe some vitamin A that you can take, and there's mixed results on if that really has any impact on the disease. And a certain percentage, 5 to 10%, will progress to blindness, and there's nothing you can do. So basically, the ophthalmologist will refer them to a retinal specialist. The retinal specialist will begin to track them, and they'll begin to only watch the progression of the disease as it ends into the central place of the macula called the fovea. And once it enters that space, now you start having impact on your central vision. And so basically they say, go home and try to learn to compensate your blindness.
Wow, what a tough message to hear. What you can do to change that and restoring vision is something that drives you guys even in the challenging times.
Oh, it's our mission. It's every day. We have 40 employees at Pixium. They are driven by it. They're touched and really impacted by the patients that we are dealing with and the people that we come in contact.
Tell us a little bit about the size of the opportunity from both a clinical standpoint. So what are the patient populations out there that can be touched by this technology, and then how does that translate into sort of a market opportunity and a business opportunity, and for many of the investors and partners that are coming on board for the journey, how does that translate for them?
So if you think about age-related macular degeneration globally, so there's wet and dry, about 200 million people in prevalence. 80% of those are dry. So 160 million people in the world, of which, as I said, 5 to 9% will eventually go blind. Our primary target markets are Europe and the US, because that's where we're doing our clinical work. That's where we'll get our approvals first. We are intervening at a stage of the disease where patients will have a visual acuity of around 2300 or worse. So to put it in perspective, we're 20/20, best corrected, right? That's normal vision. So these patients have 2300 or worse. So they no longer can use their central vision. In Europe and the US, that's around 250,000 people in prevalence, and there are about 22,000 new patients being diagnosed every year, all of which could benefit from this technology. Now, that's with the current generation of our implant and wearables, but we have a pipeline like every other smart company would. And our next generation technology will be an implant that will have a lot more vision restoration potential. And there you're looking at roughly 1 million people in the US and Europe. And again, I'm discounting right now the rest of the world because our first regulatory approvals will be in Europe and the US. So if you think about market opportunity, 250,000 currently with the current device, up to 1 million with the new device. And then reimbursement target is roughly around 80,000 minimum in dry AMD. And that's based on the cost of care of these patients over the remaining life of their blindness, right? And so you could justify perhaps even a much higher reimbursement. So right now we're just starting that work, but think about it, even at 80,000 dollars per patient implanted at about 22,000 patients in incidence, you're at about a $1.7 billion market.
Massive opportunity.
Massive.
You touched on the next generation sort of concepts in the pipeline. I know that you're laser focused on your current mission, but can you talk a little bit more about, are there other applications even beyond maybe a second generation device that you can share with us, or is that information that we'll have to track you for?
Yeah, I have to be careful.
be
But my
careful,
people
right?
will say, but look, we're a neurostimulation device, right? So, and probably the hardest application is stimulating the retina. It's the forefront of the brain. Not to get too technical, but the balance between activating the device and not doing damage outside or surrounding the device, it's a very fine balance. Again, we're right at the forefront of the brain. And so that's a very tight window, right, that you have to be able to control. But if you're successful in being able to stimulate neurons and cells close to the brain under those tight, strict conditions, you certainly could think of applications outside of that, which might be less complicated. So you might think of implanting a device in the, just under the skin for perhaps pain management, or maybe even for the, vagal nerve. So that there are potential other applications, but not that Pixium would move forward. I mean, we are, as you said, laser focused. Ophthalmology and vision restoration is our mission. In fact, our mission is bringing, bionic vision to those who've lost their sight. So that's what we're going to focus on doing.
That's right. Terrific. I know you're invited to many meetings, both clinical meetings, investor meetings. You have a limited amount of time, laser focused on the goal, as we've talked about. But I have to ask, why is LSI so fortunate to have you at our meeting this year?
Yeah, I think, Scott, we were talking about it before. I applaud the initiative. I've spent, 30 years of my professional career in medical device, a small stint in device drug combination, but medical device. And you know better than I know, because it's your mission, that there's so many opportunities in the drug space, the biotech space. There's a huge ecosystem of interest, investment, strategics and companies that are focusing on that area. And medtech, we're kind of the pariah. And so what I like about LSI, to answer your question, is, we're not so lonely, right? I mean, being the CEO of a medtech company can be a lonely endeavor. Being the CEO of any startup can, but a medtech company can be a very lonely endeavor. And so coming to these meetings and socializing and collaborating with similar people in the ecosystem, not just CEOs and not just investors, but consultants and individuals that are all trying to achieve the same goal, and that's to bring disruptive technology to market to change the standard of care from a technology perspective. I think is essential. And for me, it's revitalizing, right? Because we're fighting the fight every day, and then we come here and you get re-energized. So that's a selfish motivation that I have. I mean, you get to reconnect and get re-energized. So I think it's a critical mission that you guys are on.
Well, that's terrific. And we feel grateful that you've used the LSI platform to share your journey. One of the things we talk about here is all the companies that are changing lives. You truly, in what you're doing, are changing people's lives. And so you have our full support. We congratulate you on all your success. Look forward to seeing you go into the next part of your journey.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.